We are now recording, so go ahead.
All right, well, great. Well, welcome everybody to the first Ross Zoom ADR. We're doing this obviously differently tonight, so excuse us if there are any technical problems, but I think we've all probably spent a lot of time on Zoom in the last month or two, so hopefully things will go relatively smoothly. We'll just do a quick introduction of the ADR members, and then I'll start the meeting. My name is Mark Kruchnet, Ross resident and ADR member.
I'm Steven Sutro. I'm an architect and Ross resident.
I'm Joey Buckingham. I'm a designer and Ross resident.
Mark Fritz, Ross resident, architect.
Okay, so at the beginning of every ADR member, in accordance with ADR meeting, in accordance with California law, we do open time for public comments. If anyone in attendance wants to say something related to an item not on the agenda, you can raise your virtual hand and speak for up to 3 minutes, and then we'll continue with the ADR. No? Okay. So item number one, oh, actually, there's really only one person in the audience at the moment, but just to let you know what happens with this, what we do is we start an item, the town makes a presentation, and then the town together with the applicant presents the materials. Then I bring it back to the ADR for our comments or questions, put it out to the public, and then we bring it back to the ADR for our final recommendations on the project. And the first project is 24 Wedwood Drive, the Nickel residence, and Patrick can fill us in on what's happening.
Yeah, so I'll just, for the benefit of everyone that's just joined the meeting, everyone except for our ADR group members is muted. You'll have an opportunity to speak if you're an applicant. After the presentation from staff, you'll have an opportunity to add whatever you'd like. And then you can respond to questions from ADR group members. I would just ask that you raise your hand in the Zoom app, and then I can unmute you and allow you to speak. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matthew Weintraub, who's going to introduce our first item.
Thank you, Chair Kruchnet and ADR group members. The item before you is 24 Redwood Drive. The project is a new driveway entry gate and pedestrian gate at the existing driveway on Brookwood. The driveway, the new entry gate would fill in the gap in the existing wood board fence. And we see this location right here on the plan. And the new gates would be 6 feet tall and wood clad in order to match the existing fence. And those designs are shown here. And the driveway gate location has been approved by the Ross Valley Fire Department and Public Works. So it is not required to be set back from the property line or from the street. And the ADR group's recommendation is to staff for administrative decision. And I have not received any public comments on this project. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Does the presenter, does someone from 24 Redwood Drive want to do any explaining or commenting, or should we just start commenting on it?
So I believe the designer has entered the meeting, and so if the designer would like to speak, I believe that's Shelby Lamont. And if she would like to speak on the project, she can do so.
And just raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
I'm only having the ADR members on my display here. I'm not having the applicants.
There's a little arrow to the right for the rest of the group in that display, Joey, I think.
Or down lower, depending on the
depending
of your.
Ah, found them. Okay.
Okay.
And I think when
Patrick's
asking someone to raise their hand, he wants someone to do it in the app itself. Is that correct, Patrick?
Yes.
Not physically doing this, but just somewhere on the.
Yeah. I can't see everyone's.
She doesn't know where to do it.
Where is that, Patrick? It's under reactions, is that correct?
Yes.
No.
No, it's under participant, I think. You should be able to select yourself and raise your hand.
Yep.
I see a raised hand.
There you go. Perfect.
We're all learning how to do this. So I'm Shelby Lamont, I'm the landscape architect for this project, and as you can see in the submitted, it's an application for an automatic driveway gate in order to allow my clients to close up the backyard and have use of the backyard. They have two small kids, a dog, and with the gate opening as large as it is now, it's really hard to corral and make it that safe. And so the design that we've done is kind of crafty style house, and we designed it to go with the house, but also comply with recommended design guidelines with the 4-foot solid fence and then the window openings at the top. And we put a thick trim down the middle of it to kind of look like it could conceivably be 2 gates, even though it's all within the one frame. So we tried to articulate the gate enough to be interesting to look at and not too imposing on that length of Brookwood Road, which is technically the side of the house, side yard, even though it's not the frontage. So the front fence is still 4 feet tall and the fence can't, and this allows them to use the backyard more safely and got enough space for a party down the road. So it's pretty straightforward design.
We're having some trouble hearing your audio, so we all got some of that. But one problem we've run into in the past, do you have anything on your computer or blocking the microphone?
Not sure. Is that any better?
Yes.
Want me to start over? Yeah.
It looks like I'm getting a lot of nods. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we are interested in having an automatic sliding gate. It will slide to the west, to the left of the plan, and fit nicely behind the fence. We've designed it to kind of go along with the craftsman style of the house, with the window pane at the top and the solid fence below, which also complies with the Ross design guidelines for fences and gates, or more gates. But we're really just interested in closing up this gap in the fence so the kids can use the backyard and they can safely have access to the whole property. Right now, it's just wide open and big gravel driveway, and they don't really have to use it almost half their yard space. So it's considered frontage, but it's the side of the property. So the front remains 4 feet tall and transparent, and clearly the front entrance. And this is kind of on the side of the house for vehicular access. So we designed it, to try to articulate it a little bit more interestingly with the thickened trim down the middle of it to make it look like 2 gates instead of one 18-foot long gate, and to kind of articulate that fence line along Brookwood a little bit more without having just a wide open space into the driveway. So we are able to pull a car entirely off the road while the gate opens. And we have the pedestrian gate, which made the fire department really happy. So it's pretty straightforward, and happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay. Does anyone on the ADR have any questions?
Is it just natural wood, or is it going?
Natural wood. We'll probably seal it, but it will match the siding on the house. The color will match the siding on the house.
Okay.
And the fence.
One more question. Are you proposing any additional landscaping in front of that fence? Just on either side?
No,
Okay.
technically it's not on the property. There's no place to landscape, so we would have to get encroachment permits for that, and we're just trying to
Okay.
keep it simple.
Any other questions? No? Okay, I'll bring it back to the ADR for comments.
I think, Mark, you had Laura raising her hand,
Oh,
the applicant, just to highlight that.
I'm sorry. Can you call on, Laura, did you want to speak?
Oh, I just wanted to introduce ourselves. This is Laura Nickel and my husband, Mark.
Hi, guys.
And we're here also if there are questions. Obviously, Shelby spoke about the project, but we're happy to talk about it from our behalf if helpful or answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much.
If no one in the ADR has any more questions, I can open it up to the public if anyone has any questions. Is there anyone else who's a neighbor or anyone else who wants to make a comment? If not, I'll bring it back to the ADR. Okay, Mark, since you're up top on my screen, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think that I don't have any, as I noted, I don't have any questions on this one. Seems pretty straightforward. Seems in keeping with the house. I understand wanting to close off that section for safety purposes, right? It's, you have a lot of, on this corner lot, you've got a lot of entrances and exits within this property. No, I think it's a pretty straightforward application. The person gate next to the sliding gate is good. I like breaking it up in two. No, I'm fully supportive of this one.
Okay, Stephen,
I think it's great, and I have nothing to add.
Joey?
I think it's great. I have nothing to add other than our first house in Ross was right across the street. So I understand why you want to do this. There are a lot of people that go through on Brookwood Road, and I can see why you want to do it. And I think you've really kept the front of the house very friendly with a low fence. And this is more of a utilitarian entrance and exit. I think it's great. It's fine.
And I concur with my colleagues, so you can record that as the recommendation to the town council that unanimous approval of the project. Recommendation that it go forward as is.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much. You've got the whole family here now.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thanks very much. Good luck with all this.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Okay, that
Yes,
was
you
nice and easy and quick. So now we will move on to the Fasano residence at 9 Skyland Way.
Yes, thank you, Chair Krushnet. The project at 9 Skyland Way is a 2-story L addition to the existing 2-story residence, and we can see that on the diagram, the plan here. This is the existing rectangular residence, and the new addition would create this L. It would add 1,336 square feet to the existing residence, creating a total of 5,300 square feet in total. The new addition would match the existing in roof lines, materials, and colors, and I'll show some elevation drawings in a minute to demonstrate that. The project would conform to floor area, lot coverage, building height, and setback requirements, and all other aspects of the zoning code. The project would also modify existing fenestration, alter exterior stairs, decks, and patios in the area of the new addition, and it would install new landscaping in the east side yard. And again, I will show some additional plan sheets that show that. I will mention that the ADR group was forwarded a correspondence from the neighbor at 3 Skyland Way, which is the adjacent property, who is concerned about potential impacts to future privacy created by the new addition and has requested privacy screening for that. So now I will show a few more of the plan sheets that were submitted. Here we see existing and proposed elevations from the north. We see the side of the existing building, and we see the new L addition below. Here we see the west elevation, the existing rectangular home, and the new L addition seen straight on. And here we see the south elevation. Again, the end of the existing rectangular home and the new L addition viewed from the side. And here is the proposed landscape plan showing the new area of the new addition. And essentially this area in the east side yard would be renovated with new pathways, artificial turf, some ornamental plantings, and that's essentially the project. So in conclusion, staff's available to answer any questions that the ADR group or the public may have. I do believe that the project sponsor, the owners, Fasano's, have joined the meeting, so they may want to speak on the project as well. And that concludes my presentation.
Yep. Can you guys hear me?
Thanks, Matthew.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We cannot see you.
Okay. Let's see if we get that going
I
there.
can't see Fasano. I just see the name. I don't see the people.
Just a sec. Let me.
There you go.
There we are. All right.
Hi.
My wife is not here right now. She's on her way home. So first of all, thank you guys for doing this over video. I know we got canceled last time, so appreciate everybody making this work. I know a few of you, if not all of you, have come out and done a site visit, so appreciate the due diligence. And Matthew, I think you did a good job of representing what we're doing here. Just a couple of things, just so that you guys know. This house overall was built, I believe, in the 50s and then remodeled in the 80s. So it's about 35 years since really it was touched. So designed, 35 years ago, materials, etc. So it's in need of some updating. So that's one of the main reasons to get this done. We have talked to the neighbor about the screening. There are some trees there today. And he, like us, would like to make sure that, we keep screening between our two homes. We're very motivated to keep that as well. So we're very open to, additional plantings or whatever might be necessary to keep the privacy between our two homes there. So we're open for questions or comments.
Does anyone on the ADR have questions for the applicant?
I do. So I'm looking at the landscape plan. Hi, I'm Joey, by the way. Welcome. I'm looking at the landscape plan, and it looks to me like the big redwoods that are very close to the new addition have been removed, including there's kind of a big, I'm not sure what kind of pine it is, but it's adjacent, it's between you and the Chatleys. Is that coming down?
So let's start with the pine that is roughly halfway between our house and our lot line.
Yeah.
That is proposed to come down. The Chatleys have actually asked over the years to take that down. They've always been concerned about it, the downslope. So, this happens to be a scenario where, it can come out. And then, yes, the other one, there's a tree that is about, if I had to guess, it's probably about 10 feet from our house now.
Right.
And that is proposed to come out as well.
Okay, yes. Okay, great. That's what I was wondering about. And then what is proposed at the property line between you and the Chatleys? It looks like there's some, I'm curious about the screening.
Yeah.
What are
So
you
there's decent screening there today. There is a little bit of an open question about whether or not we can keep those trees, those specific trees that are there, or whether the fire department doesn't like those types of trees and would require something different to be planted. So I think that is maybe still an open question of whether or not we can leave that because of the neighbor's desire for privacy or whether we would need to find something else to plant there that can give some height. But those are pretty mature trees and it provides good screening today.
Yeah, I could not tell. It didn't seem like very many of them were bays, which is what the fire department really goes after. But some of them were pittosporum, which I think is okay. But yeah, I think, you know, that's what everyone cares about here is the screening between the two properties.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions? From the ADR? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who has any questions or comments about the project? Okay, then I will bring it back to the ADR for comments. Joey, would you like to go first this time?
Sure. So actually, a lot of the things I cared about have been answered. That the house be very much visually screened from the downhill neighbor, and that drainage be adequately addressed because it's on a pretty steep slope, and I think that gets a lot of water there. And the big pine that's coming down, I was worried about caring for its existence during construction. I am concerned about sort of the understory underneath the bottom story, the treatment of that. And I know probably nobody can see it, but will there be landscaping around that, the base of the home? That's my first question. And second question, the deck that is outside of the lowest story, is that required for egress? Or is that just a desired feature? Because I feel like it's kind of a deck to nowhere. And it just increases the lack of privacy to the neighbors below. And those are pretty much my only comments on the project.
Would the applicant like to answer actually the question about the deck, Mr. Fasano?
Sure. Well, so on the first one, on the landscaping, definitely open to landscaping around sort of the base. Again, I know that there are some new requirements from the fire department with what you can do near a house, but you know, we are all for trying to mask it as much as possible around the base, so open to that. The deck, I don't know if there was anything about egress. That's a good question. I'd have to go back to architect and engineer and see if that was one of the reasons.
So my final, well, go ahead, you guys, and I'll comment at the end. Sorry.
Okay. Stephen, did you want to comment?
Sure. I think that overall the project meets the rules and seems to be designed relatively sensitively in the setting and is generally fine. I like the contemporary use of the windows at the driveway side, or that part of the building, and I'd love to see kind of more of that, more consistency among the window treatments. But I know there's some existing conditions that are being left alone. And what is the material on the lower part of the building there?
I believe it's designed as stucco, the foundational part.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas the upper part is wood siding.
Yes.
I think it's currently stucco as well, isn't it?
See,
there's
notion says painted concrete.
Painted concrete or stucco. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So no, I don't have any constructive advice or any critique to offer, and I think that it's compatible with our design standards, and I find it acceptable.
Mark Fritz, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think from a massing perspective, it's in keeping with what we would expect to see something like this on the site. I think there are a few spots where you're leaving some of the fenestration, those on the
Mhm.
west elevation specifically, where you're keeping those bay windows, there are two.
Yep.
It seems like it's a little bit
Mark,
of,
I'm sorry, could you pause for just 1 second while Matt puts that up on the screen so we can all see a closer look of what you're describing?
It's the long elevation, right, Mark?
yeah, that's right. So it's on A2.2. There we go. Yeah.
Thank you. Continue, Mark.
Yeah, I think that these central bays right in the center of the facade, they're remaining as is. It seems to be a little bit of a missed opportunity with the amount of work you're doing on the project.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be in keeping with the rest of any of the facades on the building anymore, because you're removing the existing bays, here on the right-hand side of that same facade and around the corner as well. So it's a little bit unfortunate to keep those two. They're not beautiful from the exterior kind of to begin with. They're a bit of an odd stacking experience. And because you're sort of modernizing the vocabulary of the home, right? You're doing some steel railings. You've got more of a sleek look in the fenestration. Those two seem to be a bit out of character. I wonder if there's an opportunity, I know it's a budgetary issue, but to modify those as well. They will sort of stand out as, oh yeah, these, we never touched those. We touched every other window, mostly windows, but those we left. So that would be one. Originally when I looked at the massing, I thought maybe the opportunity to keep this L component, because it's more prominent to the neighbors, a little bit lower, instead of it being the same contiguous height, around. I originally thought, oh, maybe this would be an opportunity to kind of sink this down a little bit. It stretches out over the landscape a little more, but I recognize that would be a bit challenging on the interior layout and would potentially put a wrinkle in the works on making this a functional and smooth interior flow. So, but I would have almost wanted to see that, break the idea you have a bar and then you've got an extension that's coming out that is clearly something that's not in the exact same height, and sort of a bent bar versus something that's a bar versus a piece that kind of coming out. But that was just an original thought of, kind of keeping that plate lower or lowering that altogether. But I don't think there's an opportunity to do that. It was something I just thought of. Mostly it's about those two particular windows. Other than that, I think the approach is pretty straightforward.
Okay. I agree with Stephen that everything, it's great how they conform to all the building code. And it looks like the one deck that Joey mentioned and the writing's small, but it looks like it's almost exactly 45 feet from the property line. So that's 20 feet in from what the required setback is on that rear deck. And when I walked out there, like I'm sure everybody else, you notice that the adjacent home has a 2+ story glass wall that looks like it's built well within the setback. And I'm sure it's legal to be there because it's been there forever. But I'm always cognizant that I don't want to take away someone's property rights just because the neighbors decades before had built something really close to the property looking in. And while I'm sure both sides want to have screening there, it's also both parties' responsibility to have screening. Currently they have it looked like it was a 2-story glass wall that I actually took a photo of with almost no screening in front of it from their property looking onto the Fasano's property. So I'm actually fine with the deck, and I think it's great if they put screening there, and I think the neighbors could also put some screening. I don't think they had any plants or very few between their large glass wall and the property. And if screening is always a mutual responsibility in Ross and other towns. I agree with Mark's comments about those 2 bay windows. I think it would be nicer if that was sort of fixed up to look a little more appealing in a project of this size. And those are my comments. Joey, did you want to circle back now that
Yeah.
we've all opined?
Yeah, and I think we're all in really very much agreement, or at least I am with all of your comments. I agree with you. The neighbors down below, it's a completely non-conforming situation. They're very close to the property line. It would just be a nicety to keep it screened and to eliminate or reduce the kind of lantern effect of this home, or people, you know, hanging out on that deck. My guess was that was more of an egress thing, which, and obviously they're way out of the setbacks. And I really agree with Mark Fritz's comments that, boy, if you are going to spend this money and do all this work, just make those windows go with everything else. That would, it's just but it's nothing that we can compel you to do. But otherwise, I think everything's pretty much conforming and in line with our expectations.
So just a couple of quick comments. Some of the things that you guys have brought up, we actually discussed during this whole design process, sort of having the new addition be at a half height kind of thing, a little bit lower. We actually tried to do that originally, but with connecting to the house and hallways and the downstairs and everything, we couldn't really make it work well. So that was a scenario we originally did try to pursue. On the windows, you know, I think we can definitely take a look at, you know, some potential, you know, changes there to make it blend in. But I'd like to not hold things up for, you know, adjusting some of those windows there.
No, we wouldn't do that. I don't think so. Right?
No,
Okay.
I wouldn't expect to see this again just from some facade modifications there. You know, you've got a vocabulary of fenestration kind of going around the house, and that seems to be the pimple on the nose, so to speak. You know,
Yeah.
where I think it wouldn't take too much to figure out how to. The openings are there. You're framing them in. You're picking one of the sort of proportions that you've already started to set around the house, maybe to fill that in a little more in keeping.
Okay.
But it's not something we would expect to see again. It's a, you know, recommendation. This is a large remodel, so that would be, you know, something that we think would be in keeping with the scope.
It's fair.
Okay, so as far as the ADR's recommendation, we all agree that it should go forward basically as is, but we would strongly advise that the applicant change those two windows slightly to make it fit better with the rest of the architectural design.
And screening. I think
And of course, keep the screening that has been talked about and is for the most part shown on the plans.
yes.
Great, okay. Thank you, everybody.
Guys.
All
Thanks,
right.
Chris. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to the third project, which is the Hillabo residence at 43 Laurel Grove. Matthew, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Chair Krushnet. 43 Laurel Grove Avenue project is to construct 1- and 2-story additions to the existing 1-story home. The additions would be located to the back and to the east side of the existing home. The additions would add 1,839 square feet to the existing residence, resulting in a total of 4,124 square feet for the new home. The new addition would match the existing home in terms of roofing, roof lines, materials, and colors. The project would conform to floor area, lot coverage, building height and setback requirements, and all other aspects of the zoning code, with the one exception of the non-conforming aspect, which is that the project would also replace the existing non-conforming pool deck in the exact same location as it is currently. In addition, the project would renovate the pool area with a new open pool structure. It would rehabilitate the landscape in the east side yard, including new screening at the street frontages and around the pool area. And I will go ahead and roll through some of the project plan sheets. Here we see the site plan with the existing plan on the left and the new plan on the right. And we can see that the additions, based on the addition of the footprint change, would occur primarily at the back of the home and at the east side, where there is significant distance to the neighboring property. Here is a landscape plan or partial landscape plan showing some of the screening that would occur along the street frontage to screen the pool area from the public right-of-way. Here is a full landscape plan also showing that landscape screening. There would also be a new fence installed along the front, as well as new landscaping in the back of the pool patio area to provide aesthetic beauty as well as additional screening for that area. And scrolling through to the elevations, here we see the existing one-story home in its 4 different elevations. And here we see the 2-story addition here at the front of the home or the front elevation. The 2-story addition would actually be at the back of this existing structure. And we can also see section views, and here would be the rear and the west side elevation as well. So that concludes my presentation. We do have the full plan set available for review. I believe the project architect, Robert Stiles, is logged into the meeting and perhaps would like to also speak on the project. And I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and thanks also for having the ADR meeting by Zoom. I appreciate it. So yeah, our goal clearly is to make this what was about a 2,000 square foot house, big enough for the Hillbows to hopefully live there for quite a long time, have their family visit, just kind of, give them some breathing room basically. So the proposed additions kind of end up, making the house about 4,000 square feet. The bedrooms of the children and their master bedroom would be upstairs. They'd have a guest bedroom, that kind of thing. And then also try to develop some, part of the site that right now is just kind of, wild and undeveloped, and give them a place to, some extra space to recreate basically. And, our goal was definitely to take the massing of the additions, and as much as the site really kind of allows, and it's a challenging site, move that 2-story massing, away from the street and away from the neighbors as much as is kind of reasonable, given that there's a steep hillside that comes down behind the house. So it kind of, makes it a little bit challenging to, put an addition back there. So part of the project is to do a pair of stepped retaining walls to kind of essentially carve out some extra space back there. And then we'll landscape those retaining walls. We have room to put planting in between the 2 retaining walls. So those will be kind of softened. So that's about all I have to present at this moment.
Okay, thank you. If the Hillbows don't have any comment, I'll bring it to the ADR for questions. Are there any ADR members who have a question of the architect or the homeowners or Matthew?
I have one quick question about the height of the retaining walls at the rear there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having a hard time reading them on the scan. Are they 2 lifts of 6 feet each? Is that right?
At the highest point, yes. So the highest point is in the area kind of behind the kitchen, and the patio immediately outside the kitchen. So at that point, yes, there'll be 2 retaining walls, 6 feet tall, separated by, 3 foot 2 inches or somewhere something like that. And
Then if you were to take a cross section through the pool, or right where the stairs are at the east side of the garage, what would the height of the walls be there?
as you go, you can see there are steps that go up to the pool deck.
Yeah.
And so that makes the lower retaining wall shorter.
By 3.5 feet, I guess.
Yeah, somewhere in the neighborhood. I could tell you exactly.
The topography is also kind of tapering down a little bit there, I think.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. Yeah, that lower retaining wall in the region of the pool deck is 3'9" tall.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's really, if you were to kind of be able to see that wall at all from the street, that's the portion that you might possibly be able to see from the street. Right. But of course, we're hoping it's not really visible. But
Well, I think you're too far below at the street level to see. Maybe you'd see the upper part of it. I don't think you'd see the lower retaining wall. I think you might see maybe the upper half of the upper one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably, based on my recollection.
Yeah, which is why we kind of added some landscaping above that wall, just because, try to make it look better, basically, from the street.
Actually, Matthew, sorry. And from one angle, I thought you could see landscaping drawn in between the two retaining walls, but I don't see it on this plan. Is that on a different one, on a different sheet?
That would be A011.
What's the distance between, or the clear space between the walls?
The walls are offset by, just give me a second here. Should know that off the top of my head. 37 inches. And I'm assuming the walls would be 10 inches thick. So that gives us 2'3" between the walls for landscaping.
Any other questions? Is there anyone in the audience who wants to have any questions or comments on this project before I bring it back to the ADR for recommendation?
Well, so my questions might be part of my comments. Just FYI.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
No, I just, whenever I comment, I will ask a few questions along with it. I may not have gotten. I'm mostly concerned about the fences. So I'm just going to ask a few questions when I comment. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, why don't you go now, as long as you're on topic, and maybe Matthew can change it to the appropriate screen for all of us to see what you're asking about.
Okay, so do you guys mind if I go? I'll just go first. I have two kind of things that are of interest to me and concern to me. And the first one is the facade at the garage, because I feel like that's the only thing that the neighbors, like anybody even sees when they drive by. It's the most apparent thing when you drive by at a very quick speed. And I understand why the fenestration is the way it is on the second story over the garage, because when you look at the floor plan, that makes sense. But when you look at it from just driving by, it's a little bit of a disorganized facade and not really centered. The window, I just feel like, is there any way on the inside you could make any changes to make that giant window that's heavy on the right and then the little window that's light on the left be a little bit more designed? That's my first question. And then my second question is, when the two things I care about the most, because first of all, great design, it's set toward the back. I don't think it really affects anyone, and it really makes that house so much more livable. But I care about what people see in the town of Ross when they drive by. And what I'm seeing is 3 different fences. I'm seeing that kind of charming, yet it looks like it's a little cattywampus. It's kind of, it might need a little straightening. The original fence is very charming. Then there's the black fence that separates the property from the pool. And then there's this proposed hog wire fence to enclose the new turf area. I would strongly suggest that that entire situation was dealt with as one element, that they all went together, they all had the same treatment, the same hedges in front or in back, because it's a little disparate and it looks kind of mishmash. So those are my 2 major comments: the fenestration above the garage door, and then the lack of cohesiveness with the fencing. Which is what everybody sees. That's what anyone who passes by sees. That's it.
Okay. Rob, would you like to comment on either one of those things before we continue with the ADR comments?
Well, I'll start with the fencing. I definitely see what you're saying. I think one of the challenges is, you know, the fencing around the pool is probably the fencing that is the least attractive, right? But it is existing, and I think it's also maybe non-conforming, and so our thoughts were to just basically leave it alone. And it does, you know, provide, you know, privacy. So, you know, we like it for that reason, of course. But so, you know, I'm not sure, you know, I don't know how complicated it would be to change that fencing. I think that's probably the one that would make, you know, would benefit the most from it. Our goal with the lower fencing, that kind of is the wood and wire fencing around the recreation area, is that, you know, for it's, you know, a redwood fence with wire infill, and our hope is that basically the pittosporums that we'll be planting and the other plantings are just going to kind of almost envelop the fence, you know, and so the fence would just kind of, you know, end up fading into that screening. Then as far as the windows, I certainly appreciate your comments. I can understand your concern. I can't say just, you know, right here, right now, you know, whether, I'm not sure I'm ready to commit to changing them, but I think it's a very valid point. So, you know, currently, as you mentioned, those windows are really kind of driven by the plan, right? It's like, you know, the plan kind of wants them to be there. And so that's kind of why they're there. Anyway, so those are my comments.
Okay. Stephen, would you like to go next?
Sure. I had the same thought about the fencing, that inviting another character to the play isn't always, you know, desirable. So it would be nice if those were consolidated into 2 designs, you know, 2 patterns, or one ideally that was kind of cohesive with different riffs amongst the 3 different requirements. You know, one where you want more visual privacy, et cetera. But having the existing fence is not very nice at the pool, so it certainly would be nice to either screen it entirely or to make it more attractive. And so I do think that the fencing strategy seems a little disjointed. I should start by saying that overwhelmingly I support the project, I guess I should say. And so I think it's terrific. I think it uses the site well. I think that it harms no one, and I think it's great. So my thoughts were the fencing also, and then the windows, both the ones above the garage and the ones in the hallway, I find to be insensitive to the proportion and rhythm of the level below. I think they're insensitive in size and also in placement. So the ones above in the hallway appear to me to have some flexibility. I know that one's in the master vestibule and the others are in the hallway, but it's not on center with the ones below. It's off by a little bit, which is you know, annoying to a bilateral, mostly symmetrical human being. And then they're also just a little bit large. I feel like what's so nice about the house is the scale of the windows in the dormer and kind of the rhythm of the windows below. And I feel like the ones above aren't as sensitively designed and are not harmonious with that. And the master has these long windows on both sides that are completely symmetrical inside the bedroom, which I can appreciate. I know the plan wants that, but the exterior wants some alignment with the garage door and some balance there too. So I think that I would hope for some more consideration to the public on the composition of the facade. And then on the landscape walls, I know that our design guidelines call for some sensitivity around the natural topography. But on a hillside site like this, I think that it really doesn't harm anyone to create more usable space by pushing back into the hillside. And so I think of it from a design guideline standpoint, not about whether it's okay to modulate the earth, but more about its attractiveness to the rest of the public and how much of those walls you see. And so I would hope that I don't know if 23 inches or 26 inches or whatever it is enough really to plant between those walls, and their foundation system is not clear to me in the plans. And so I wonder if they should be shifted a little farther apart so that more success can be had between them for growth. You don't see them mostly. So I don't think it's really a big deal, but I would hope that that is successful on the property too. And I don't think it's going to injure the public at all. So I don't think it's a big deal. But I was looking at the height of the walls and trying to think how they could be most successfully greened. And that's it. And so I think the project is great. I support it. I would hope for some modification at those windows. I don't think that we would need to see it again. I wouldn't kind of withhold approval pending that, but I would hope for that.
So Matthew, can I ask you a question? Or I'm not sure who this question should be addressed to. Because we would like to move forward if possible. And if we make changes to windows, would we end up needing to go back to the ADR? Would that delay us essentially, I guess is my question. Would that delay going to the town council or?
Well, if you chose to go back to the ADR group for further recommendation, that would result in a delay in going to the next scheduled town council meeting. But from what I'm hearing so far from the ADR group members, and we haven't heard from all the members yet, there may not be a need to come back to the ADR group with revisions. That this might be something that we can address through minor revisions that you might choose to make, or through conditions of approval, or you may choose to move forward with the project as it is, based on the ADR group's final recommendation here. So I would say let's, let the other ADR group members comment and come to their sort of conclusion, and then we can address that question.
Okay, sorry about that.
Mark, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So I concur on the fencing. I think that's been spoken about, and I would want to reiterate Stephen's comments on the facade. I think that the windows that Joey spoke about over the garage, I concur. They do seem to be a little misaligned, or a missed opportunity to simplify that. I would say that the window that you've got on the garage on the left-hand side above the door seems to be of a smaller sill height. Strikes me as an opportunity to pick up that as a sill height across the hallway.
Yeah,
I
I
agree
can
with
see that.
Stephen. It seems you're maxing out those windows in above the
Mhm.
connection with that lower roof line. It does seem to be
Mhm.
too much. I guess the dormer right in between there, between the first and second story on the front facade, also somehow seems as if something you might not have designed in if you were building this from scratch. That
Mhm.
seems like it is a leftover component of the previous and existing design,
Mhm.
where I think you've got a lot. Like, you've got a lot going on in this front facade, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of depth. There's a lot of layers. There's
Mhm.
you add in the solar, which I applaud, by the way. Thank you.
Mhm.
You got some skylights. You've got a recessed front porch. There's a lot of articulation going on in this facade.
Mhm.
That dormer on that lower level seems to be something that adds to the visual, I'll call it a little bit of a chaos, a little, visual complexity of the facade that doesn't need to be there. I wonder if you'd benefit from removing that in any way to simplify the overall composition. That struck me as something that could be an opportunity to simplify things. But mostly it's really about the proportion of those windows and the composition of those windows, and finding something that fits a little bit better on that second story hallway. And and that bedroom on that side, I think would be appropriate. And the one comment I would make about the retaining walls, I think you have an opportunity on the retaining walls. So I'm going to move some paper around. It's going to be super loud. When the retaining walls turn back to the closest portion of where they meet the house, behind the kitchen, I think is where, I don't know, Matthew, if you can bring that up. It's a site plan. Yeah, that one. Yeah. So where they are, if you zoom in a little bit where the kitchen is, they turn the corner, and I actually can kind of concur with Stephen quite a bit, where pushing these back even further at that point where you have your N2 location there. I'm thinking of being in that kitchen, and that walkway between, I think, could use some relief before the first retaining wall. Because I think you're going to want some planting on the lower level of that retaining wall in addition to the middle level. Like 12 feet of retaining wall is substantial. I think there's an opportunity to slide those back into the hillside a little bit, maybe separating them more at that location. You don't need to do it along the whole location on the right-hand side of the project, but just there to give yourself more relief and light to come down into that kitchen. I just think that, even a foot, even 2 feet would be a huge difference in feeling relief to that back wall. Because I can imagine looking out, and 12 feet, you're going to be looking at retaining wall or plantings that are awfully close to the building facade. And I just think that might not be a successful experience to be inside. You're going to all that level when I make it as good as you can. And last, I will ask a question. Just I wasn't sure about there's a pergola over the pool. I just was curious, like it's underneath the trees. We didn't mention it. It seems pretty reasonable. It was just, if you wanted to comment on that. Is that just to give some closure to a sitting area near the pool?
Whoops.
Yeah, way over there. It was something that caught my eye as I didn't expect. I was just curious if any of the other members of the ADR had any comments on that.
You're just talking about the roof structure that's up there now. Yeah. It's for shade. It's just to provide kind of a sheltered, shaded area for hanging out by the pool.
Okay, that's fair. That hillside seems to be fairly well screened, or tree, has a tree canopy that hangs over that portion. I just wasn't sure if it was somewhat redundant.
A lot of those trees are bay trees. There's kind of a mess of bays in there, and those are going to be removed. So that's going to be get a lot more sun, basically.
I see.
Yeah.
It might be. Are there other significant trees that you think will be? I'm looking at this plan right here. I see the 32-inch bay off to that right. It's got an X, I think.
That's just a marker, but that may go, actually. That we were just talking about that today. That tree has like a big rotten section of the base of it. So that particular bay tree might actually have to go. So.
Yeah, I would encourage whatever you end up losing on the hillside, whether they're bays, whatever the case may be, because they're ill-placed or not of good species at that point. You know, I would think that you might have an opportunity to replant that hillside a little bit. And then I would, on the front fence, is there any opportunity? It looks like you're screening that. I'm not sure I can follow exactly where the fence is on this drawing in front of the pool that Joey and others have spoken about. Can you highlight for me where that is in this plan? I've seen it in person, but
It's parallel to the pool right there, Mark.
it's up at the pool level. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That
All
looks like an edge of paving.
Paving. Yeah, I thought it was closer to the road, but I could be wrong in that fact. The pathway you're showing there is on the inside of the fence, Rob, or on the
outside of the fence. So
Downhill.
between the fence is between the path and the pool.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The fence that everyone's kind of, mostly talking about. Yeah.
So then it's just ground cover in front of that dark fence, but no real hedge or anything designed to screen that dark existing fence, right?
That's correct. At the moment, we don't really have a screening planting that's designed to screen that fence.
You have the pittosporum off to the right. I think you mentioned off to that lawn area. You're hoping that hogwire and pittosporum kind of blend together.
Yeah.
I think it would be appropriate maybe to pull that pittosporum all the way to the left if I'm seeing those as the indication that they are. Continue that down to the left-hand side of the project. So there's some, if you're not going to replace the fence, at least there's consistency in the landscaping prior in front of that fence. Those two different styles.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good suggestion. I like that idea. Yeah.
So are we going to come back to final recommendations?
Yeah, I'll make my comments and then we'll just sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it for me, Mark. I think number one,
I forgot about you, Mark.
That's okay. I'm biding my time.
No, I liked moving the massing away from the street. I applaud that. Thank you. I applaud the solar because that's great. So I think there are some fenestration pieces to deal with. But Mark, you're up.
Okay. Well, I pretty much agree with what the other three have said. I think it's a great project. I think the house is going to look very nice. It's great that the massing is far away from the street, as you could really see in the A212. I do agree that the fencing should be more cohesive. I agree with Joey's and others' comments about the windows above the garage and even carried over to the hallway. It just seems those top floor windows could be changed to not look so complex. And, maybe taking away that dormer helps it out, or maybe that's unnecessary. And if the dormer's something that you really like for the light it gives in, then maybe it just needs to be reworked with those hallway windows and the bedroom windows and some other configuration. So it's more, makes more architectural sense from the outside of the building. And I think with the planting, we actually have a 12-foot retaining wall here next to the creek. It's really tall. If you stand next to it in the creek, it's massive. So I do think making sure you get some kind of planting in between those two and something that's, maybe 4 to 5 feet high to start with will really make it much better for you, the home occupant, when you're out on that nice deck that's just outside the kitchen. Having a nice row of greenery makes a big difference there. So those are my comments. Joey, did you have something else you wanted to add before I give the sort of sum it up for?
I will just, is this like our final recommendations? The more I listen to everybody, I honestly, when you look at the front facade of this house, it's all fence. And that is what people are going to see as they speed by. So I think you have to get that right. And I think it has to be more cohesive. I think it has to be choose one of the three styles, not the middle one, and make that what you do. You know, either the hog wire with the some hedging in front of it and behind it, or you carry over the very charming fence and kind of fix that one up and move it all the way to the right, all the way out to the end of the lot with maybe some adjustments for height and screening. And then that my final thing will be, once I listen to all of you guys talk about, I opened up the discussion about the upper floor windows. I think when I listen to you all speak, what strikes me is they're just a little heavy. They're a little heavy sitting on the second story above a certain scale on the first story. And my first reaction was just to the organization of the second story windows above the garage. But then when it was mentioned that the ones in the gallery above were just a little big in scale compared to the ones below, it just might need a little tightening up. And I don't know if that needs to come back before us. And I'm very cognizant that you've been waiting for a long time because of this whole COVID situation, and we'd like to get you moving. But those are two things I feel really strongly about: the fencing, getting that right, and a little bit more of the fenestration on the second level. And I'll let it go at that.
Well, maybe what I could suggest is that the applicants could show those changes on those two particular items, along with the whatever landscaping they end up with on the retaining walls, to Matthew. And if Matthew was had questions as to the intent of it or the success of it, maybe he could reach out to Stephen or Mark or Joey for sort of just confirmation on changes that didn't slow anyone down at all.
Yeah, we've been doing a little bit of that, and I'm fine with it. I'm happy to help.
Matthew, would that work?
Certainly.
Okay, well, great. So that's our, go on.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question?
No, please.
I just wanted to make sure the comments that were regarding the retaining walls and the plantings, I understand the concern about there being enough room for viable plants in between, which I think there is, just based on past projects that I've worked on, but I think that is definitely a reasonable concern. But I just want to make sure that it was understood that our intention is to have star jasmine basically growing all across that upper retaining wall for sure. And that's in our landscape plan, and it may not be easy to understand on the plan, but that is there. It's definitely in our that's our intention. That's what we're going to do. And then just about pushing the retaining wall farther back by the kitchen, that is the trickiest part of the whole site. That's kind of so I'm a little nervous about us committing to moving those retaining walls, because it's just, I don't know how easy it is to actually move farther back at that point, because of the topography. It's just, that's where the biggest delta is, right there where the kitchen is.
Yeah, Rob, I can understand that. And I think that comment in particular was more for just a livability experience, not a design.
Yeah, we're concerned. It's a concern of ours too, for sure.
Yeah, so I think I think that issue, and you'll deal with that appropriately. I think when we think about design review comments, some of those are, hey, this might be better if you did that, versus, okay, we would love to see a public facing, impact comment.
Okay.
I want to make sure that my comment about the retaining wall was more about, the challenge, plantings, et cetera, and light and air from that space. So, that is not something that would hold you up in any way. I think the committee here.
You've got a bunch
Just the windows and the fencing. I'm sorry, Joey, I cut you off.
No. I'm joking. You have a bunch of designers in one room, and we can't help ourselves.
That's good. It's all good.
Okay. Great. So Matthew, feel free to reach out if you want about those windows and fencing at any time. Otherwise, they'll be going on to the council as soon as they can.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank-
Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay.
Okay, now we have on to item number 5, which is staff communication.
Wow, we didn't even say hi to the Hillabos.
They were quiet.
I was just getting a message that there's people waiting in the waiting room, but I don't see anyone here. So another quirk of Zoom, I guess. But
Might be Peter.
I do again want to thank everyone for taking the time to put together this meeting. I know that the rest of this group also shared the urgency to get people moving with their projects again. Everybody's been frozen for the last couple months, and so I think it's really appreciated by our applicants. So I want to thank you for your flexibility and putting this meeting together, and actually having what I think was a very meaningful meeting in response to these proposals in a format that none of us are used to, although we're rapidly getting more and more used to it. So I really appreciate it from everyone. I'll just quickly give a couple reports. The council met last Thursday, and they saw 2 projects that had previously been before this group. One was 4 Willow Hill Road, which was an upper story addition, and one was 49 Glenwood, which was an addition to the house. And they approved both of those. The designs had been modified based on input from the ADR group moving forward. We also have 2 projects, as I communicated to you in email, that are ready to go. We didn't want to stack too many on this meeting, but we don't want to necessarily wait till the next regular meeting, which is now going to be the 3rd Tuesday of the month. So we are putting together a special meeting of the ADR group on June 4th. So I'll send out an invitation for that meeting shortly, but that's going to be a special meeting, and we'll hear 2 items, one upper, and Matthew, if you can help me with the other one. You're muted.
Sorry about that. 70 Ivy Drive.
Yep, so 1 upper and 70 Ivy. And I believe that the applicant for 1 upper can make that date. We haven't heard back from 70 Ivy. I don't think we've reached out if they met, but let's go on that assumption that June 4th will be the next meeting of this group. And I'll do a little follow-up with the council to see if there is some overlap as far as appointments go. But if we do have full board for the next meeting, I would recommend, or maybe I'll put it off to the regular meeting. Next time we have a full group on a regular meeting, we should discuss whether or not to keep the current chair or move the chair around. So just something to think about before we go into the next meetings. And as I also communicated to you, in May, we did activate all construction as far as the health order. So so you may be hearing from neighbors that are wondering, why is this construction started up next door? Are they approved to do that? They are. So all construction is allowed. We've been processing permits. Now we're able to have these meetings and start issuing permits. So things are moving in the construction industry, and we're getting lots of applications, and we're issuing lots of permits, not much slower than when we've been previously. So at least in the short term, the freeze on construction hasn't really interrupted the industry. And I believe that's all I have to report on right now. So thank you.
Okay. And we have an approval of, sorry, did you have a comment? Someone?
I said, how about the minutes from?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna go on. Yeah, we also have an approval of minutes for February 25th. I was not at that meeting, so someone else should recommend and then second the approval. People who were actually at the meeting.
Mark, you're muted. Go ahead, Mark.
I was yelling at my son. I can state I've read the minutes and I don't have any adjustments to them, so I would submit them for approval.
There's a tiny little a little mistake on page 2, just in terms of my comments. They were comments about remember, I didn't attend this meeting, but I submitted them. And it was comments about 49 Glenwood. And then it said ADR group member Buckingham, you know, blah, 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 submitted this. And then it just says she was concerned about the proposed expanse of hardscape and recommended visual screening from Willow Hill Avenue. And that just was the wrong street. It should be Glenwood Avenue. It's just a tiny little typo, I think. It's just page 2 of the minutes. I just read through them, just, I don't know, out of interest. See what I'm talking about, Matthew?
I do. I've noted that and I'll make that correction.
It's a quickie. Okay.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Actually, that was very efficient. It's 8:15 now. We got through 3 projects. Things are apparently quicker on Zoom than they are in the real world. So that's good. Oh, and as far as One Upper Road, I sort of stressed that several people were very involved in the comments on that one. So I wanted to make sure that as many people as possible were available to hear whatever changes they're asking for. I didn't want that to just be me and only 1 or 2 other people.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
anyone, that'd be a good one for you all to attend. That's it. I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Stay well.
All right. Stay
You too.
healthy, everyone.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Patrick, thank